Story number 1. Ever feel like you're not alone, even when you're the only one in the room? What if something was always watching, lurking, just out of reach, just out of light? In tonight's unnerving descent into the unknown, we follow a young man whose quiet suburban nights transformed into a haunting war with something unseeable, something that lived in the shadows. Grab your blanket, turn down the lights, and don't, under any circumstances, look into that corner. Welcome back to Dark-cresset, where darkness isn't just a setting, it's a story. This is The Thing in the Corner. In November of 2016, 17-year-old Evan Carver had just moved with his mother to the quiet, fog-lined town of Fernbridge, Oregon. His mother had recently taken a job at the local historical museum, and with Evan's father out of the picture, it was a fresh start for them both. The town was the kind of place where the nights fell fast and the silence felt too thick, like even the air didn't want to make a sound. Their rental house was small, creaky, and old. It had weathered blue siding and a covered front porch that felt like it sagged under a century of ghosts. Evan's bedroom was upstairs, tucked in the attic-like corner with slanted ceilings and one lone window that looked out into the woods behind the property. At first, he thought it was kind of cool, quiet, isolated, private, but that would change quickly. The first few nights were uneventful, just the regular creaks of an old house and the occasional sound of raccoons fighting in the woods. But on the 6th night, something changed. Evan awoke just after 2 a.m., drenched in sweat, his blanket kicked off, his heart pounding. He didn't remember dreaming, but he felt like something had just been in the room. From that night forward, Evan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not in that casual, I'm paranoid kind of way, but the bone-deep awareness that something was fixated on him. It was always from the same place too, the back left corner of his bedroom, a spot just behind the small dresser, where the shadows from the sloped ceiling settled deepest. He would sit up in bed, stare into that corner, and feel his skin prickle with cold anticipation. It was like staring into a well, black, endless, and full of things that didn't want to be known. Every night it got worse. The shadow in the corner seemed to grow. The darkness there became thicker, like it was absorbing what little moonlight crept through the blinds. One night, unable to sleep, Evan turned on his bedside lamp and played music through his phone. The moment the light hit the corner, he could have sworn he saw something move. Not dramatically, not like a jump scare, just a subtle twitch, like someone adjusting their stance while standing perfectly still. A week before Christmas, things took a terrifying turn. Evan had fallen asleep with the lamp on, something he'd started doing nightly. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the bulb exploded. Not just flickered out, shattered with a loud pop, sending bits of glass across the floor. Evan sat up in a panic, heart thudding. The room was swallowed in darkness. Then came the sound, barely audible but unmistakable. Breathing, slow, measured, and not his own. It came from the same corner. Evan didn't move. He barely even breathed. Then, click. His phone turned off. Dead battery. No explanation. He scrambled under the covers, shaking uncontrollably, waiting for it to pass. For the rest of the night he heard light shuffling, breathing, and that unmistakable sensation of being stared at, watched, studied. He finally told his mom, who attributed it to stress, insomnia, or just the creaky weirdness of an old house. But Evan knew better. This wasn't in his head, and it wasn't the house making noises. Something knew he was there. He stopped sleeping, started keeping a flashlight beside him, triple-checking the corner before laying down. But no matter how long he stared into it, he could never see anything clear. Only the feeling, the presence. One night, his friend Jayla stayed over to help him work on a school project. They set up a sleeping bag and fell asleep watching horror movies on Evan's laptop. Around 3 a.m., Jayla sat up suddenly. "Dude, what is that?" she whispered. Evan opened his eyes and followed her gaze. She was staring right into the corner. He didn't want to look, but he did. The darkness there seemed to shimmer, like the heat waves rising off asphalt. A dense, swirling, shadow-like figure barely distinguishable from the wall, but definitely there, watching. And just before Evan could reach for his flashlight, it stepped backward into the wall. Gone. Jayla refused to ever return. Evan became obsessed. He set up cameras, stayed up researching shadow people, entities, hauntings, but the recordings never caught anything. Nothing visual. But the audio? That was a different story. On one particular night, Evan captured 6 straight minutes of whispering. Not intelligible, not English, but human. Dozens of overlapping, raspy voices, murmuring in a language that seemed ancient and unnatural. And then, at the 6:01 mark, something growled. That was it. Evan broke down. He stopped sleeping in that room, started staying downstairs on the couch with the lights on all night. His mother, now concerned for his mental health, scheduled him with a counselor. But when he described the events to the therapist, she only asked one question. "Have you ever heard of the veil?" Evan hadn't. She explained it as an ancient theory, some call it myth, that certain places in the world act as thin spots where reality weakens, where things from the other side can look through, or worse, step through. It's been almost 9 years. Evans since moved to Seattle, works as a web developer, and lives in a modern high-rise far away from small towns, shadowy corners, and silent attics. But he never sleeps without a lamp on. He refuses to sit in dark rooms. And sometimes, just sometimes, when he's especially tired, he swears he can still feel it. That presence. Watching. Waiting. From the corner. Thanks for watching this terrifying tale from the shadows. If you've ever seen something you shouldn't have, if you've ever felt eyes where there should be none, tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon, because here at Dark Cresset, the darkness is never far behind. Now, let's get to the story number 2. Tonight's tale is not of ancient curses or ghostly apparitions, but of something far more human, and yet somehow not. A presence with eyes, but no voice. A silhouette lurking in the woods, just beyond the firelight. This story? It's called The Uninvited Camper. It was July 2011, and 15-year-old Eliza Franklin wasn't exactly thrilled about spending her summer break in the dense forests of northern Oregon. Her parents, both avid hikers, thought a full week of camping was the perfect detox from social media and city noise. They packed up their 2 tents, a cooler full of supplies, and their rescue dog, Rolo, and headed to the Pine Brush Reserve. No cell towers, no Wi-Fi, just trees, trails, and silence. The reserve itself was vast and mostly uninhabited. A dusty, rutted path wound through miles of thick woods before revealing a small creekside campsite. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful. Birds chirped overhead, the sun filtered through moss-covered trees, and the air smelled like cedar and earth. But Eliza couldn't shake an odd sense of stillness, the kind that feels too quiet, like the forest was watching, holding its breath. Her dad brushed it off. "Just your city brain trying to adjust," he laughed. But Rolo, the normally hyperactive Shepherd Lab mix, refused to leave the edge of the clearing. He just sat there, ears up, eyes fixed on the trees, tail still. That first night, Eliza lay in her tent, listening to the crickets and river flow, but something else, fainter, seemed to move just beyond the tent fabric. A single twig snap, then nothing. By the third night, the woods didn't feel so empty anymore. Eliza had gotten used to the daytime quiet, afternoons spent sketching or reading under the trees while her parents hiked. But every night, without fail, a creeping anxiety would gnaw at her when the sun dipped behind the pines. And each night, she'd wake up at 3:14 a.m., eyes snapping open like clockwork. At first, she thought it was just camping jitters. Maybe her brain knew it wasn't in her room. But the weirdness didn't stop. It was on the 5th night that things changed. Eliza had gone to bed early, exhausted after a long hike. The stars were unusually bright, and the only sound was the soft bubbling of the creek. Rollo was curled at her feet, twitching in his sleep. Then, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing, right outside her tent. Frozen in place, Eliza slowly turned toward the tent flap. Her breath caught in her throat. The fabric of the tent was slightly illuminated by the moonlight, and there was a distinct shadow cast across it. Not an animal. A human-shaped silhouette. Someone was standing right outside her tent, so close she could hear the gravel shifting under their boots. They didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, breathing heavily. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She waited, barely daring to blink. She thought about calling out, but her voice was lost, stuck in her throat. After what felt like hours, the shadow stepped back and slowly vanished into the woods. She waited 5 more minutes before unzipping her tent and running to her parents' tent in a full-blown panic. Her father, bleary-eyed and groggy, swore no one had left the camp. The only footprints they could find the next morning were theirs, and one strange set of boot prints, half sunk into the soft moss, disappearing toward the trees. Eliza begged to leave, but her parents insisted they'd just been hearing things. Until the 6th night. Around midnight, Rollo began growling, low, deep, and guttural. He stood, hackles raised, and ran to the edge of the camp, barking violently into the woods. Eliza's mom tried to calm him, but he wouldn't stop. That's when they all heard it. Branches snapping. A whisper, like someone whispering in a language none of them understood. And then, laughter. Guttural, broken, and wrong. Her father grabbed the flashlight, swung it into the trees, and for a split second they all saw it. A figure. Gaunt, pale, wearing a torn flannel shirt. No shoes, no emotion. Just standing there, watching them. That was it. At dawn, they packed up everything. Stuffed tents and food into the SUV without breakfast. Rollo refused to get in until they opened both back doors, like he was checking to make sure it wasn't already inside. On their way out, they passed an old forest ranger outpost. Her father stopped to report the incident, only to be met with an unexpected reaction. The ranger, a woman in her 60s with leathery skin and a rifle over her shoulder, just shook her head. "You were at Creekside 12, weren't you?" They nodded. She sighed. "We don't send folks there anymore. Not after what happened in '98. Man went missing there. Ex-military, off his meds. Lived in the woods for weeks. Never found. But people keep seeing him. Still wearing that old red flannel. Just watching." It's been over a decade since that night, but Eliza, now in her 20s, says she still dreams of that face. That hollow, expressionless face watching her through the tent. She hasn't gone camping since. Won't even look at flannel. And Rollo. He passed away last year, but until the very end, he'd bark in his sleep. Every night, always at 3:14 a.m. She's never been able to explain the breathing, the shadow, the laughter, and neither could the ranger or the other reports that would trickle in over the years. Whispers of campers going missing, hearing footsteps around their tents, finding handprints pressed into the dew on the outside. But the scariest part, Eliza swears. She zipped her tent shut that night, and when she ran out to her parents' tent, it was unzipped from the outside. Not every monster howls. Some don't even speak. Some just watch. So the next time you're camping beneath the stars, with only canvas between you and the forest, ask yourself, who's really out there, just beyond the trees? Thanks for watching, brave souls. If this story chilled your spine, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your eeriest camping story in the comments below. Until next time, stay in the light, and beware of the watchers in the woods.